So just very quickly about me. I'm the founder and principal of Message Agency. We're a full service digital agency here in Philadelphia. We are a B corporation. So we are certified as a corporation that has a triple bottom line. We're not your typical agency by any means. And we only work with nonprofits, universities, foundations, and really only on projects that have a social or environmental impact. So I wanted to sort of start today by thinking through this very simple question, which is, your leadership or other folks asking you, how well are we doing? How is our program performing? And how you think about answering that question, again, both when you're communicating to an external audience and communicating internally. So I'm going to ask you all 3 questions. And if you can use your reactions or do a thumbs up to answer the question. We didn't have time to get a poll together. So the first one is, can you tell the story of your program's impact? How many people feel very confident in being able to tell that story? Okay, we have maybe 2 folks. Either Adrian, Kim, I'm going to call some people out. Would anyone who feels they can do this want to just give us an example of what they feel is a way of communicating that impact?
I would say, thinking about the mission of my institution in terms of like what our goals are, I think that really is a driving point for us. And so part of the, the end point is, do we live up to that in supporting students and going out and having, getting career opportunities that pay a living wage, that really have career growth and that kind of thing. And I think that's exactly what happens. We are designed and intended to support, a special emphasis towards low-income students, even though that's not the only place that we center our efforts, but certainly in living up to that we have the opportunities and the quality of education and certainly the data, because we do collect information with really strong data on our graduation feedback surveys from alum. And so we know that we're doing that. And we also have strong partnerships with business and industry. So I think that data definitely speaks to that, and the students themselves, contribute to that narrative.
That's amazing, Adrian. And what you're doing is following a lot of best practices, and you're taking that extra step, and you're actually not only following up, but you're asking the students how your program is impacting their lives. I think it—
And the employers.
And the employers.
We do employer surveys.
Because they're stakeholders too in all of this, right? So some of you may be sort of reporting measurable outcomes that are just simple data points, like the number of students recruited, persistence to graduation, maybe employment, and you're reporting those numbers. And that tells part of the story. But are you able to really explain how well your program is meeting the needs of students during the program, their families? Do you know how it's impacted their lives after they, either during or after they leave your program? And do you know the weak spots or the blind spots in your program? Where you need to improve, where there are unmet needs, because situations and things are changing all the time. And you need to stay on top of those to make sure that you're not just, relying on the status quo in your program, because you may be missing opportunities to really make an impact. So the next question is, do you really know who you are serving and how they think? How many people feel that they can answer that question confidently? Not a lot of folks. Yeah, Adrian, you want to do this?
I feel like I'm talking too much, but anyway, I just think this is evolving, like who we think students are. So much has changed. Just 5 years ago, I think the conversation is very different right now, and people's mindsets are very different about post-secondary education and, the market has changed, and that dictates so much. If you look at, college choice literature that's evolved over the years, part of it was this whole, thinking about return on investment. We have students that can go right out in the industry because the industry is that hungry. If you seem bright enough and you're eager enough, they'll take you. So I just think it's a mixed bag right now. Still trying to figure that out a little bit. And generationally, I think, students who are coming through right now have experienced a lot of things, their families, everything from the Great Recession to this pandemic. I'm not 100% sure what students are thinking. I don't think I can take that for granted now.
Yeah, and that is exactly the point too, Adrian. Actually, if you want to take over this this whole session, I think you can do it.
I'm going to be quiet from here on out.
No, please don't. You're providing amazing information. Thank you. This really is the question: is things are shifting all the time, and we all may have mental models that are fixed from a little bit ago, or when we started a program, or when we started our own professional development. And have you really taken the time to formally define who is this audience? How do I group audiences and stakeholders into groups that have common characteristics? Do I understand what motivates them now? What motivates them, their parents, what their concerns are? What are they looking for? How can you better establish trust with them? What might help them gain confidence in your school or program? Or do you just kind of assume that you know what they need? Because, often when we speak with clients, our clients are in many ways experts on the people they serve. But if they don't check in frequently and use some very simple tools to make sure they do understand that, or they do understand that because maybe you are participant facing and you're constantly engaging with participants. You may have that perspective, but other people in your organization might not. So we want to talk about making sure that whether it's your very timely understanding or that sort of gap, how can you get there? How can you fill in that gap? And how can you make sure that others also do that? Because it is really about can you make better programmatic decisions, marketing decisions, and really what is an informed set of strategies in your organization. So that was the second one. The third one is, do you speak to your stakeholders only, or do you listen to them as well? So when you're reaching out, do you just have communication moving in one direction, or do you make sure that that's moving in both in a formal way? Anybody feeling confident about that?
I just this is Kim from PDE. I just put a comment in the chat. We don't work with students at the Pennsylvania Department of Education on a daily basis. And so as we get our deputy secretary out to visit the campuses, one of the things that I really try to do is engage student panels. And we visited CCAC couple of months ago, and they had the best student panel because it was so representative of students today. They're not all 18 years old coming out of high school. And so we had veteran students, we had immigrant students. We did have somebody that was traditionally aged, but we also had students with learning disabilities and students who've been in school for a really long time. So it was just, those are the kinds of things that we really need to make sure that we have those touch points, because when you're sitting in your office and you're not really dealing with students on a daily basis, it's easy to forget that they're just so diverse. And
Kim.
Yep.
CCAC.
Community College of Allegheny County.
There you go. Thank you.
Sorry.
Got to define our acronyms. I do that all the time. Thank you, Tom. So, thank you for that as well, Kim.
Hey, Marcus, before you move forward, one question I have in regards to when you're saying your stakeholders, are you thinking specifically about a certain type of person, or are we talking about anybody who's a stakeholder, meaning they could even be the students?
I think it's, when we say stakeholders, Tom, it's almost synonymous with audience, right? Stakeholders are really who's who's are you engaging in your program and who benefits from it, and who has interest in it being successful. So that's everything from funders to, and we'll talk about this in a minute, the students themselves, their families, funders, employers, right? And everyone who really has some interest in this program's success. And we raise this question because often when folks think about marketing or communicating, it's always in one direction. They think about marketing and not engagement. Communication in one direction. Do you ask opinions? Do you ever just simply ask them what they want or what they need or what their experience is? Also thinking about when you speak with them. Are you just speaking with them during and after the program? Or have you ever stopped to speak with students who might be good candidates for your program, or who recently started your program, and understanding what led them there and what gave them confidence in what you're doing. You really do need to make sure you understand that, just to not only recruit better, but make sure your program is going to serve those students better. Barbara, I see you took off mute. Do you want to make?
Yeah, I just first of all, I think Adrienne, first, nice to see you. But it's really interesting about what you were saying. And I think during the pandemic, first of all, we sent emails out saying, what do you think? What do you want to do? I'm a consultant right now. But students are so Zoom fatigued and they're so email fatigued. So I'm not working with a college or university at the moment, but they get so many emails, a newsletter, something from finance, something from this. They don't open the emails. So if you're trying to get information like a survey or something, it is really hard to get them to pay attention because they're not even reading the emails they should be reading from their school. So it's very hard to get. And then when you do get them and you do have a program, it's like the floodgates open. I need mental health services. I need to understand what tax benefits I can get for college. I need to understand this. At the moment, I'm working a lot with foster youth. They have other traumas in their life that they're dealing with. So they don't want to even talk to you because they are dealing with thousands of other things that, understandably are going on in their life. So we've tried to simplify it by making some, information sheets they can look at on their own. But it's really, the pandemic has just heightened everything and made things so much more difficult to get that information that you need at the same time you need to do it because people are just having such a tough time. And also, because the pandemic came on so quickly, we just assumed that everyone would know how to adapt so quickly to Zoom learning. And that's not the case. Teachers don't know how to necessarily teach online. And we don't stop and say to them, let's do a quick little, session for a month where we can teach you the best way to teach online. We just said, oh, by the way, you're teaching online because the world shut down. And then same with students. If I'm not paying attention, you might see me looking like this, and I'm making a shopping list because I've had enough. And so we need to think about all these things in addition to what my needs are. And that's a really tough thing to do right now.
It is, Barbara. It really is. And the good news is that there is research out there to help you think about, how can we best engage those folks, meeting them where they are, understanding. And when I say where they are, it's that certain age bands email is just not where they are. They're somewhere else entirely. And are you going there to find them? Do you even know where to start? There is a digital divide as well, generationally, and just not understanding where folks are interacting, because they're online, but they're communicating in different ways. So that's also part of this. It's understanding not only the need to do this work, but where you can find folks. So I'm going to keep going because this always happens. I go over time all the time. And I apologize to everybody. So one of the things that we like to talk about when we discuss audiences is that you are not your audience. And I think the comments earlier about the overwhelming diversity and diverse needs that we have in the current student population is it's overwhelming. It really is. There's so many perspectives. So what I want to talk to you about today are some principles of what's called human-centered design thinking. That sounds very, haughty, but really what it means is centering the people that you are serving in your thinking, because it's so typical and common and understandable for folks who are designing and running programs to think internally, to organize their mental models and their thought processes based on their perspective and what they're doing. It's super simple. But if you flip that around and you start thinking about your audiences and your stakeholders, no matter what it is you're designing, whether you're designing a program, whether you're designing, a communication strategy, whether you're designing, a website, whether you're designing an experience, that will change how you think, and you will ask fundamentally different questions, and you will come to different conclusions if you do that. And so it's instead of thinking about what you need to communicate or what you think is best, it's saying this is who my audience is and what they think is best, what they need, and answering that in your design. It sounds, simple and simplistic, but it's something that folks often forget. There's another concept that goes along with that, which is cognitive bias. And we all have it. We have it. We draw conclusions when there's a gap based on our experience. And that is just a natural human tendency. But we have to be aware of it, because we're filling in characteristics and generalities and needs and mindsets and motivations through our own filter. And so this is really, thanks, Janine. I love that. Sometimes I feel like that actually during the day, but that's, we assume we know what others are thinking, and it's very important to have that front of mind. And there's a few tools that we have that we use they're human-centered design thinking tools that we use in our processes, regardless of what we're designing. They're used for program development. All of these things are going to be helpful. So I'm going to go through three key things, which is, just defining your audiences, describing who they are, and speaking with them to validate your assumptions, as well as to learn new things, and using all of that to not only improve your own perspective, but to make sure that you can transfer that perspective and share that perspective across your organization and make real change. Because if you're like I said before, if you're the only person who has that perspective, you're not going to be able to make as much of a difference or impact on your program, and it becomes your perspective. It's not something that is outside of you. And it's much harder internally to defend and to promote. So when we talk about audience segments, whenever you're thinking about any program, it is crucial to formally define and understand who you need to target, reach, and engage. Because if you just have, it's parents and students, and there's lots of different types of families. And we're going to try to address all the needs we can. But if you don't actually define those segments, you may forget a few important ones, like employers, which someone raised, like teachers, like funders, all of these folks who, again, have interest in bearing. So it's important to make sure that you list them out, right? In addition, you have to group them. So here's just an example. Maybe it's students, parents, partner organizations, funders, media. I forgot employers, right? But sitting down with your team and talking that through, and it seems simplistic, but it is super important, because then everyone on your team understands these are the groups of folks we're serving. And when you group them and put them into segments, so you further define who they are, you can think through, maybe there are funders who do not have a relationship with our program but should, and there's current funders. You may communicate with them differently. They may need to hear different messages. You may reach them through different channels. You're going to reach parents definitely through different channels than you're going to reach students. They may have, similar behaviors or mindsets. So they may be from, different groups here, maybe, partner organizations and funders, maybe they're from, they have a different relationship with you, but they need to hear the same information from you. So you might group them very differently. So it's a conversation. How do we sort of create circles and figure out where those are and what do they bring to our program? Here's an example of just taking the segment student, and you could start breaking that down even further. Well, there are prospective students, there's current students who are in our program, there's alumni, and then there's folks who are disengaged who we know we really need to serve, but we haven't been able to get them in the pipeline. How do we find out who they are and what they need and how we can help them move along? So these are all ways of, and I don't have time to go into a lot of depth here, I apologize, but I'll try to send some resources as well your way so you guys can continue to do some research. These are more, probing questions. So the next piece of that is once you have these audiences defined and everybody agrees, this is how we need to think about these folks because you are experts, you know this and you can do this. Then you start to develop what's called a persona. And a persona is basically a character sketch. And it's fictional, fictitious in that it's constructed. It's not meant to represent one individual. It can, a persona or this character sketch can actually represent a lot of different needs, right? From a, let's say you're thinking about doing one for current students, and you're able to, take needs across a diverse group of students and kind of bake that into that persona. The reason that it's helpful is because it actually lets you think about when you're designing something or thinking about addressing something, you're thinking about a specific someone. Again, it might be a fiction, but you're saying, well, how would Tom deal with this situation, or what are Candace's needs? And when you have that person in mind instead of a set of concepts, it also changes your perception and it changes the questions you ask and how you're going to answer them. In the design field, we say it's creating experiences for a specific someone rather than a generic everyone. And so it makes you really get down to detail. I'm going to show you what this is. This is an example of a persona that we did for, this is the John Carter Brown Library. And they have basically a rare book collection that is very arcane. It's manuscripts, books, and artifacts that are actually pre-Columbian to, I believe, 1821 is the cutoff for their collection. And you would think very, very arcane. However, they wanted to reach a broader group of folks because there are academics all through Central and South America who are interested in their work because they are reinterpreting based on these materials, reinterpreting colonialism, slavery in the Americas, all of these things that they are looking at, and these pieces of these artifacts are critical to their research. So we wanted to understand, there's a variety of folks that we did personas for, but we wanted to understand who are these folks. And so we have Pablo. He's a South American academic. He's 56. He has certain characteristics. He's international perspective. He's a researcher and an academic. He's also an enthusiast around collections. He's very curious, and he's also a potential partner for JCB. And we talk a little bit about just who he is. He's an established expert in the field of early American history, working out of a large university in Peru. Although he's familiar with the JCB, he's never been there and depends on digitized material for his ongoing research. And then we start talking about the goals that he has and his behaviors and mindset. He's fluent in English, but he is a non-native English speaker and would prefer to experience the site in a different language. Well, that tells us that we want to make sure that website is translatable. into multiple languages. He's frustrated about it. He spends a lot of other time on library websites. He gets frustrated when he can't find what he needs. So we want to make sure that we are designing things in ways that he's able to, easily and quickly find what he's looking for. But he also doesn't always know exactly what he's looking for. He might want a browse experience. And so we wanted to provide that and have him encounter these materials in a way that is very, just sort of curiosity. And have both things. I need a specific thing and I have to search for that quickly. I have, I just want to browse and see what's there and see what curiosity brings. So this is very simplistic in some regards. You all will have much more, much deeper personas likely, but these are things that if you start to think about them and actually codify them and document them and agree across your organization that these are the folks that you are serving, then there's a few things that happen. First of all, it helps you build empathy for the folks that you are serving because you understand their perspective a little better. You develop focus. You can communicate informed consensus internally. Again, this is a tool that helps you have everyone share the same understanding of who you're serving and what their needs are. It helps you make and defend decisions internally because it's no longer your opinion. It's something you all agree is a perspective that you've all formed together. And then it also helps you measure effectiveness because you can ask, is our program doing these things for this person? And another way to either create these personas and really understand these audiences or test your assumptions, so confirming what you already know, is conducting audience research. And some of the things that Adrian was talking about, perfect examples, whether it's surveys, whether it's interviews, there's lots of different ways to engage folks. And so these are, and again, I may be saying things that you all already know, but there are ways to do both primary and secondary research. So online surveys, telephone interviews, focus groups. Often we recommend if you're going to do surveys, have an incentive. That's one way to help. Barbara, what you were talking about, no one's reading their email. They may read it if the subject line says, give us your opinion and earn blank. That will get their attention. It's unfortunate that you have to be that sort of straightforward about it, but it will get their attention. And other ways of just secondary research and looking at data from the census, doing analytics, looking at social media insights, looking at what folks are saying in groups and in other places online, and sort of listening, doing some social listening. Other types of data, right? It can be qualitative. It doesn't have to be a survey. We often find that 5 or 6 interviews that are about a half an hour in length tells us more than any survey, because we're engaging someone and probing in the moment and hearing something that we hadn't heard before and asking for more depth. And it really makes a difference. Sometimes you can do those interviews prior to conducting surveys because it will give you some important questions that you want to collect more quantitative data around. Also, different methodologies, formative. This is what I was talking about before. Making sure you're understanding before someone enters your pipeline and your program and becomes an alum, how are they going to get there? What do they really need? What is changing? How is the impact of COVID and the impact of an earlier recession or current recession? What is the impact that's having on your students and on the families you're serving? Or summative. It's more about evaluation, and we're all doing evaluation because our funders want us to, but not a lot of us are doing that research before we get to engage these folks. So these are really just some aspects for conducting research to find out that information. What it does is determine relevance, breaks through the noise, right? Because there's cognitive bias, there's all these things that we have, there's prior knowledge, there's an assumption that what we knew last year is still the case. And it's also about identifying pain points and motivations or preferences you didn't know about. It helps you think creatively about how you're going to solve those problems, because those students and families and other stakeholders are experts on themselves, and they're going to give you that really critical information. And it does ensure that your investment in your program and the investment that that student makes is going to have a greater return for everyone. So the broader impact is important. These are a few details. I know I'm running out of time, Candace. I already got the wave. We'll share these slides with everybody, and I'll package it with a few links again, so you can continue. But we mentioned doing it before, also doing it during, so that you're measuring effectiveness in the moment and making critical changes as rapidly as you can. And sometimes that's difficult when you're in a program and there's bureaucracy and there's leadership and there's people you have to convince about things. But if you have data to back that up, it's a lot easier to make that argument. And then finally, just some thoughts about applying what you've learned. So this is about informing yourself and your colleagues. It is about influencing decision-making and the authority of data to convince others of needed change, and really starting to create a culture of research-informed decision-making. But the other thing is, it elevates not only your program, but you. It increases your value and the contributions that you make to your program for leadership. This is a way of demonstrating how your investment in professional development has helped you and your program and the folks you serve.